So there is this strange group in the middle of Europe. You might have heard of them. With their goulash, paprika and palinka, Hungarians have no connection to any of their neighbors, German, Latin or Slavic ethnic groups. Okay, maybe there's some connection, but anyway. The closest nationalities that have anything to do with them are Finnish and Estonian, and even they are like the distant cousin that you see at someone's wedding once in your lifetime and then never again. But in this case they also use words like kasarikanit and whatever this is. So if Hungarians are so out of place, how did they end up in the middle of Europe? Hungarians, Huns, is there a connection? Let's explore their journey from the very beginning up until they occupy their current location, the Carpathian basin. Hey man, now that we have some time between wars, don't you want to pick up a hobby? I was thinking of linguistics. Okay, maybe hiking, cycling, or linguistics. Really? Why would I want to learn something like that? Linguistics. Fine. That will take time though. Hopefully nothing major happens in the near future. All languages have some overlap with others, and based on these similarities, linguists came up with three major language groups for Eurasian languages: Indo-European, Altaic, and Finno-Ugric, if you are interested in them. First they thought that the Altaic and the Finno-Ugric groups are closely related to each other, so they placed the homeland in Central Asia. Some even visited this place and they thought that they heard some Finnish words, but that turned out to be not the case. The next study was looking at the words of beekeeping. I'm going to ask you nicely for the last time. Where are the Hungarians? You will never get anything out of me. You will regret this, you little... Enough, honey. Dude, do it again. You need therapy, my man. Because the words of beekeeping are similar in Finno-Ugric and Indo-European languages, they were looking for a common homeland for these groups in Europe. I guess if it didn't work with one group, they are going to try with the other. They compared old plant names in today's climate, which led them to name the Volga-Kama region as their homeland. But some of you might have already noticed the mistake. Comparing old plant names to today's climate when it went through huge changes is not going to be much of a help. The idea was good though, so they gave it another try. Clever? Yes, very clever. Isn't it a smart idea? Yes, it is a very smart idea. Genius? Genius. I want it. It's mine now. They put the homeland from West Siberia, through the Urals, all the way to Northern Europe. They really wanted to cover all their bases. Soviet archaeologists supported this idea, but they ended up pushing it a bit south. Okay, maybe they didn't cover it all. Based on some archaeological findings, in Finland and Estonia a new view gained popularity, which says that their ancestors were already in their current place. To accommodate for this, linguists came up with the Great Homeland idea, which said that the homeland stretched from the Ural Mountains all the way to the Baltics. Okay, maybe this one covers it all. Archaeologists supported this idea, but other linguists didn't. There are Iranian words in Finnish, and how the hell did those get up there? They are like 12.5 million languages apart. We covered some of the main theories, but I guess we should come to some kind of conclusion, although some of the theories were drastically different compared to the others. The general idea points in the same direction. In the 21st century, most linguists place the homeland around the Kama River and the Ural Mountains, so I guess I will do the same. With this, let the journey begin. As we are talking about thousands of years ago and far, far away from the birthplace of birthplace. In this area still the hunter-gatherer lifestyle was dominant. So they would forage whatever was available from the forest around them, and also hunt small animals including catching fish. This would change when a global climate change occurred. Not by us for now. Which also led to the vegetation to change as well. Where are you going? Come back! Come back here! I love you! Hey there. I guess you will do until I find someone better. This led to the breakup of the Finno-Ugric people. The Finnish groups headed west, following the forest. The Samoyeds headed north to the tundras to breed some of the cutest dogs out there. Who's the good boy? Who's the good boy? Yes you are, yes you are. So fluffy. And the Ugric people, who stayed in place and adapted to the new environment. Thanks to this change, they got into contact with other groups. Hi guys, I'm new here and I'm trying to learn about this steppe lifestyle, animal husbandry and agricultural thing. Salam. Merhaba. No worries, we are just starting out as well. You can join us. Cool. So, what do you guys like to... We don't need to do this. Oh. The Ugric people refer to themselves in this form, which could have meant person who can speak. The reason could be that now that they are in this new environment, they couldn't communicate with their neighbors, and as a consequence, their languages stayed well separated. In Hungary, this mentality is still alive to this day. Whoever wrote the script got lazy because the same things happened again. Another climate change occurred, still not our fault for now, which also led to the breakup of the Ugric group. The vegetation changed back, so the area became covered by forest again. Some of the tribes were not too keen on moving, so they changed back to their hunter-gatherer lifestyle. They are the Obugric people, and they are the closest relatives to the Hungarian language. In the meantime, the Hungarians, so now we are talking about Hungarian history, they moved south following the steppes.
Come back, you are that someone better, I love you!
In this area the climate was warmer and drier, which led to droughts, so they had to find new ways to deal with it. This led to the birth of the nomadic lifestyle, dominated by horses and sheep. As these steppes were not exactly the richest lands, they had to lead the animals to new fields and let the old ones recover. As there were frequent droughts throughout the summer months, and animals require a bunch of water, they had to lead them to areas with more rain. We kinda lose track of Hungarians when they enter into this big nomadic stew. It's not like they kept biographies or anything.
Who am I?
The next stop is the northern part of the Caucasus. This is when we hear about them again. There were multiple movements around this time, and they probably got here during the migration period. This era started between 300 and 375, when the Huns invaded Europe from Asia, and eventually led to the invasion and the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Hold it together, man. Hold it together. When different tribes started moving west from the Far East, they pushed other tribes in front of them, and forced them to move as well, which probably included the Hungarians. And I guess it's a great segue to talk about the Hun and Hungarian relation. In Hungary, it's a widely spread idea that the Hungarians are descendants, or close relatives of the Huns. One of their origin stories is the tale of Hunor and Magor, which goes like this. One day, during a hunt, the two brothers encounter a beautiful deer. After a long chase, they lost the deer and they couldn't find it no matter how long they searched. But in the end, they found themselves in the middle of an untouched fertile land, ready to settle. They went home, gathered all their belongings, and went to live in this new land. Then they kidnapped some women, and their descendants are the Huns and Hungarians. On a more research-based note, signs indicated the Huns' military, political, cultural, religious, and linguistic structure is similar to the Turkic nations, and the Hungarians were exposed to a lot of Turkic influence when they roamed the steppes. There are also some genetical studies that try to connect the Huns and the Hungarians. The wide consensus is that it seems unlikely that they are related. Maybe when the Huns were integrated into other cultures, some ended up in the Hungarian camps. But at the end, this is still up to debate to this day, and it also influences modern politics, so I guess I'm leaving it at that. So back to our journey. Here we come. Now that they arrived from the dry steppes to the more humid lands of the Caucasus, they changed their lifestyle again. New location, new me. That's how they roll. Or ride, I guess. They switched to a half-nomadic one, which meant that they had a summer and a winter location. And here I am trying to afford one. When spring came, they planted wheat and other plants for their animals. Then left for their summer location, which was basically a huge pasture where their animals could do what animals do. Around autumn they returned to their winter location and harvested the now grown crops. Now grown crops. They lacked the words for agriculture because of their previous steppe lifestyle, so they had to borrow some from their neighbors. Because of this, and spending a lot of time with Turkish tribes on the steppes, there are hundreds of words in Hungarian that have Turkish origin. Let's move on to a period where we know a bit more about the Hungarians, and we also meet our first historical characters. Byzantine Emperor Constantine Papergenitalius, who lived after the conquest of the Carpathian basin, in his De Administrando Imperio, in English, On the Governance of the Empire, wrote about the Hungarians residing in a place called Levedia, at the Chidmas or Cingilius River. It is uncertain where these rivers are, but researchers put them around the Don River. It is uncertain when they settled here, but it was either around 750 or 830. The emperor also talks about the Hungarians living under or being subjugated to the Khazar Khaganate, a nomadic Turkic empire that focuses a lot on trade. The Hungarians had 7 tribes, led by voivodes or chiefs, who would support each other if a war broke out, but they were not a solid political unit.
I can see that the neighboring tribes are preparing for war. I say we attack them first! Yeah! War! Let's attack! We help you, brother! By the way, I promised this Slavic tribe not to attack them, and you just massacred all of them. Great.
Levedia was named after one of the voivodes called Levedi, who is the first concrete person that we know of. During Levedi's life, the Pechenegs, another nomadic tribe, invaded Levedia and forced the Hungarians to cede the territory around 850. It is believed that a small group fled north, while the majority moved to the next stop, which was the last destination before the conquest of the Carpathian basin, Athens. Even hundreds of years ago, Hungarians were curious where they came from. So in 1235, Friar Julian, one of a group of Hungarian Dominican friars, left Hungary to find a Hungarian homeland. He traveled to Volga, Bulgaria, which was somewhere around here, where he found Hungarians, and despite 300 to 400 years of separation, he was able to communicate with them. This group was the one that fled north after the Pechenegs attack, but he didn't know that. He named this place Magna Hungaria, or Great Hungary. Initially it was believed that this is the Hungarian homeland, but linguistically that would have not been possible. It would be nice if things are that simple, but things are never that simple. In 1237, Friar Julian returned to Magna Hungaria, but found it devastated. This was the time when the Mongol hordes reached Europe under the leadership of Batu Khan. Friar Julian returned to Hungary to warn against the mortal danger on the horizon. This eventually led to 70 to 80% of the population being massacred in certain parts of Hungary in 1241 and 42. Alright, we are almost there. The Hungarians had a close relationship with the Khazar Khaganate. They also copied their dual leadership system. They had two high offices, the Kende, who was the spiritual, religious leader, the shaman, because they were pagans by the way, and the Gyula, who was basically everything else, military, economic leader, judge, and so on. Now let's talk about Athens. It is identified again by Emperor Constantine Pyrogenius. It is the land where these rivers flow, but not all of them can be identified.
If they want river names, I give them river names. Huh? That's real though.
Historians can identify some of these rivers with the Dniester, the Prut, and the Siret. But the rest are a question mark, but it still gives us a nice ballpark for where this region could be. Now that they moved here, they were no longer under the influence of the Khazar Khagan, but the Khagan reached out to Leverett to make him either the Kende or the Gyula. It is unknown which, in exchange for becoming his subject, but he was reluctant.
Do it, no. Do it, no. Do it, no. Look, here's this dude Amos. He should do it. So, do it. No, do it. Fine.
So this way Amos became one of the leaders of the Hungarians, but some sources say that it's not actually him, but his son Arpad, and not by Leverett offering opposition, but by a coup d'etat. I would put my money on the second option. Generic power struggles and screwing each other's over is more Hungarian nature to me. Some researchers suggested that actually after the coup d'etat it was Amos and Arpad governing together, one of them as Kende, the other one as Gyula. To make the alliance stronger between the Hungarian tribes, they swore a blood oath, where each leader would put some blood in a cup that was filled with wine, and at the end they would drink from it.
Ah man, I cannot tolerate blood. Didn't you just massacre a whole village of Slavs? Yeah, but that's different. How the goulash is that different?
I mentioned previously that the alliance between the tribes was mainly militaristic, but as time went on, more and more power was in the hand of the Kende and the Gyula. After some time, they got rid of the Khagan's control and they subjugated the neighboring Slavic people, they raided other groups, and sold slaves to the Byzantines. Such nice guys. 862 is the first recorded date when they went all the way to East Francia in Central Europe for a raid, or because they were hired by another ruler as mercenaries. This was actually a common theme in the following decades where they helped out others for some money. And finally, we arrived to the conquest of the Carpathian basin. The land was politically quite divided after the fall of the Avar Khaganate in 822. The Trans-Danube was occupied by Eastern Franks, while the Bulgarians took control of the south. The rest was populated by the remaining Avar survivors in their tasteless state. Stateless state.
Hey. Fuck.
There are three main theories why it happened. Number 1, while the main military force was away from Athens, spreading love and peace in Europe of course. The Pechenegs and the Bulgarians attacked the rest of the Hungarians and forced them to migrate. If this was the case, we would see a decrease in women and children in the Hungarian population, but it doesn't seem like that. The explanation could be that the attackers were focusing on the livestock, allowing the population to escape in the meantime.
Today we get rid of the Hungarians. Once and for... a horse!
Number 2, it was a planned operation. During their campaigns in Central Europe, they were looking for rich lands to settle, and they decided on the Carpathians. After the conquest, the Hungarians were still very busy pillaging and raiding, which could not be the case if they were defeated decisively a few years beforehand. Number 3 presents a mix of the previous two, They were planning to move their settlements, and when they were attacked, they put this plan into action. There are a lot of uncertainties how these events happened, so take them with a healthy dose of skepticism. In 894, the Hungarians made an alliance with Svatopluk, king of Moravia, that they would attack Arnulf, king of East Francia, in Pannonia for some land. This alliance is preserved by the legend of the White Horse, where the Hungarians offered a beautiful white horse to Svatopluk in exchange for selling some land in the Carpathians to them. I smell BS. Pannonia became devastated after the attack, and some sources write the following about the Hungarians. They killed men and old women outright, and carried off the young women along with them like cattle to satisfy their lusts, and reduced the whole province to desert. That's more like it. I mean, oh no. Before or during the attack, Svatopluk died, and according to the customs of the time, the alliance between the Moravians and the Hungarians was over. Either because of the previous agreement or because of the death of Svatopluk, some of the tribes decided not to leave the Carpathian basin fully and spend the winter in the Upper Tisa region. In the next year, the rest of the Hungarians crossed the Veretsky Pass and joined these tribes. This was the planned conquest scenario. Another one is that Byzantine Emperor Leo the Wise, Constantine Polyblabla's dad, not wise enough to give his kid a normal name, got into a war against Tsar Shimon I of Bulgaria and hired the Hungarians to attack the Bulgarians in the back while he was fighting them on the south. Soon enough, Tsar Shimon proposed a truce to the emperor and simultaneously encouraging the Pechenegs to attack the Hungarians in the back. It worked, so the Hungarians were forced to withdraw their forces from Bulgaria to protect their people, but it was already too late. They had to leave the steppes behind and cross the Carpathians. Based on certain writings, Almos could not enter Pannonia, for he was killed in Elderlu, which is Transylvania. This could be the memory of Almos's sacrifice for his catastrophic defeat. It could be similar to the Khazar Khaganate, where the leader was sacrificed in case of a major defeat, saying that he is not capable of leading his people anymore. We only hear about the Hungarians again in 900. While they were ravaging Italy, of course they were, they received news about Arnulf's death. They received news about the death of Arnulf, king of East Francia, and they used this to their advantage. While they were returning from Italy, they attacked the Pannonia region on their way back and took it as their own. After Svatopluk's death, Moravia descended into a civil war between his two sons, and the Hungarians took advantage of this and took Nitra, modern Slovakia, from them. Shortly after, Moravia ceased to exist. The Hungarians were raiding different parts of Europe, so in 904, Arnulf's son, Louis the Child, invited Kursan, who was the Kenda or the Gyula next to Arpad. Again, it's very difficult to figure out which position belonged to who, to discuss a peace treaty. The invitation turned out to be a trap, and the whole envoy was assassinated. After Kursan's death, Arpad got hold of his position, which meant the end of the dual leadership system, and he became the sole leader of his people. Louis wanted to take back some of the land that the Hungarians conquered, so in 907 he attacked them. The biggest battle was around modern-day Bratislava, where the Hungarians made a decisive victory and sealed their place in the Carpathian basin. But their terrorizing of Europe didn't stop there. They continued to pillage the continent, they even got as far as Iberia. They also started to raid the Byzantines, but they had to come to the realization that all this plundering is not sustainable long-term. The raids to the west stopped in 955 and to the south in 970. This eventually led to the coronation of Stephen I, the first king of Hungary, who permanently established the Hungarians in Europe. I will be making a video on that soon. If it's out, you can check it here, or you can take a look at the rise of Genghis Khan.